Welcome to the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast.
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 Welcome to the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast with me, Dr. Janine Anderson. Heads up, this show may contain adult language and may mention specific foods. If you find either of those to be too triggering, I trust you to take care of yourself and do what you need to do. Hello, friends. It's good to be here with you again today. Today, we are talking about something that I think is really interesting and just gets to the heart of the matter, and that is values. Before we get into that, I have a couple of announcements. First, by the time you hear this episode, I should get my edits back from my editor for my book, Recovery Your Perspective. So again, you guys have been so nice because people have been asking about the book. The book is not out yet. I'm in the final stages of getting that edited, and it will be out in fall of this year, 2017, in case you are listening in the future. But as soon as I get her edits back, I'll be able to send out the entire intro of the book, and it's pretty long, to everyone on my email list. So if you're not already on there, get on there. You can sign up at eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com, and you just add your email when that pop-up comes up. And of course, I would never send you spam or nonsense like that. I would love to send you that part of my book, and you all can let me know what you think. And because it's not live yet, if it happened to be something that you really liked or you thought was really terrible, you could absolutely email me with your feedback. And again, my email is podcast@eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com. So I also wanted to thank all of you who email me. I love reading your emails, and I'm working really hard to respond in a much more timely manner. I can be really delayed with that, and I am so sorry. But I always love it when people write to me with show ideas. So let me know what you want to hear about, especially right now, April 2017. I'm planning the next 2 upcoming seasons. So if you want an episode about something, let me know sooner rather than later, or we might just have to wait a while to kind of get to that. Another thing I'm thinking of putting together, and this is really exciting to me, nothing has been finalized yet, but I'm thinking of putting together like a 5-episode mini season that is all about resources and information that would be a little bit more geared toward family and friends, but of course would be applicable if you yourself are working on recovery too. So let me know if you all think that would be helpful or if that's something you're interested in. It would be great to know what the level of interest is in that before I start working on producing that. And finally, I recently got back from the IADEP conference for eating disorder professionals. That's the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. And the conference was awesome. If you're a treatment provider, I highly recommend it. But I wanted to share a couple of quick things with you all about my experience there. So first, I am so lucky and grateful because the guests I've been fortunate enough to persuade to come on the podcast in the upcoming season or 2 are amazing, amazing, incredible people in the field. I'm going to try not to get super nervous and be a massive fangirl when they come on, but I kind of just allow for that to happen if it does. So you all are really going to like them. It also means that in the next season of the podcast, there might be more guest episodes, just a little bit more guest episodes than solo episodes. So currently, I think it's like 50-50 split. And in the future, just to accommodate getting these people on, I may have to do some more guest episodes. Let me know if there are any particular questions that you think, I don't want to release anybody's names before the episodes come out because I don't have permission to do that. But I don't know, say that you wanted to ask some of the top authors in the field who are therapists for eating disorders or, dietitians who work with eating disorders. If you had questions that you wanted to pass along to me, just email them to me at podcast@eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com. So I feel really fortunate when I get to attend those conferences and learn from the leaders in the field, but I also don't think that that knowledge should be locked up so only people like myself are hearing that. I think my podcast listeners should get to hear from the best as well. So that's what I'm working on. And the last thing I wanted to tell you about the conference was that there were so many instances during the talks and just at the conference in general, like networking hours or panel discussions, whatever, where the passion of the treatment professionals was so obvious. Like it could be felt in the room. And I thought you all should know that at a conference of over 800 providers, people care about you. Like there are so many professionals who are working extremely hard because they truly do care deep down. They want a better life for you. They care about you. They want the world to be better for everybody. So I just wanted to pass that along in case you're feeling down or alone or just kind of crappy today. Please know that there are a ton of professionals who deeply, deeply care and are just working so hard to make things different for you and for the rest of us. Okay, let's talk about values, shall we? So first things first, what are values? So very sophisticated technology here. When I do a Google search for the definition of values, here's what comes up. A person's principles or standards of behaviors. One's judgment of what is important in life. I like that one the best. What is important in life? In my book, I define it as the principles that guide our lives and lead us to the kind of person we want to be in the world. So these are the ideas that we try to live in accordance with. So some examples of values include kindness or bravery, or we may value freedom or curiosity, honesty. Values work in therapy is most closely associated with a type of therapy called ACT, stands for acceptance and commitment therapy. And as y'all know, my book, Recovery: A Perspective, talks about understanding eating disorders using CBT, DBT, and ACT. So this is an ACT-focused episode here. ACT has become a lot more popular in treating eating disorders because the concept of values tends to be really appealing and can help people buy into treatment and the hard work that therapy and nutrition therapy can be because you're working on things that you truly care about. And ACT works by trying to increase the clarity of your values so you get clear on what you really value. And it also works to help you increase taking actions, taking steps, doing things in your life that bring you closer to living out those values. So overall, ACT is trying to help you to live out those values more. I'm wondering, like, if you're thinking, okay, this sounds kind of cool, like I could get on board with that maybe. How do I get started? Well, it might be helpful to figure out what your values are. This actually can be really easy, but I think it goes best if you allow some time for reflection and introspection and truly to kind of think through and allow for some time to settle and work through some of the ideas and roll them around in there a little while. So you can easily look up, like just do a Google search for lists of values online. And so just type into list in Google, like list of values, and it'll bring up lists that have like so many more than you've ever imagined, and things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of, like at the top of your mind, like maybe you value security or stability or aesthetics or adventure, or you value spontaneity, all kinds of different things. And then if you're working with a therapist, they may even be able to do this with you. I think most would be open to doing this, and I bet a lot of therapists are already trained in how to do this, but there is an ACT therapeutic exercise called a values card sort. And basically it's where the therapist already has values printed out on little pieces of paper. Sometimes they actually are printed out on little cards, almost like index cards or something. And it just says like the name of the value on it. So you might have like honesty, kindness, compassion, but you have, I don't know, like 50 or 100 of those printed out. And the thing with values is they all usually sound really good. Like we all want to be all of them. So when you do the values card sort, it helps you to figure out, okay, really, what are the most important ones? So for me, spontaneity is cool, and I definitely need that in some areas of my life, but I much prefer stability over that, like a classic harm avoidant, recovered person that I am. Or freedom is important to me, but there may be some things that are more important to me, like compassion is one of my top values, if not the top one. So it's not that I don't value freedom. I love having freedom to do things, but it's just that compassion, if I have to rank it, which is what that therapeutic activity makes you do, really comes up tip top of the list for me. So that's another one that you could do with a therapist, or you could do that on your own. So I would strongly encourage you to take some time and look up what some of the values are, again, to give you a really good broad idea of all the different kinds of values out there, the things that don't come to mind, and take some time to think about like, okay, well, if I could only pick 3, which is usually how the values card sort exercise ends, is you have to identify your top 3. What are the top 3? So it helps you to get clear on what are the things that are truly most important to me when I'm forced to pick amongst a bunch of things that are actually really awesome. So I kind of want to move into values and why they're really important in eating disorder recovery, not just in general, because I think they are important in general. Values inform how we live our lives. We want to know what's important to us and make decisions in accordance with that. But I have the perspective that we authentic people have different values from our eating disorders. And not everybody agrees with me on this perspective. And if you don't, that's totally okay. So just take what's helpful to you and leave the rest. And I've definitely talked with a lot of other treatment providers who don't necessarily agree with this, but I think that when you are in your eating disorder, because you have an eating disorder, eating disorders, I think, have their own little set of values. For example, I just really can't believe that if you didn't have an eating disorder, that you would value the number on the scale that much. Like, it makes you value that more. I think at minimum, even if you don't buy into the idea that eating disorders have different values than you do, I think at minimum, they twist the values that you do have and exploit them. So maybe you do value having a certain aesthetic to your body or a certain type of appearance, or you just value enjoying your appearance or liking your appearance in general, which is okay. Your eating disorder is going to exploit that for its own purposes and make that even more extreme and more unhealthy than it would have if you didn't have an eating disorder. So also, I've just noticed that people who are in recovery, and especially with the recovered clinicians I've talked to, just because we have that perspective that we've been through it, but we also work with it, so we see it a lot, is that I really feel like people start to focus on different values when they're in their recovery and after their recovery. So I know that my values have changed for sure through the process of recovering and kind of being on the other side of that. So kind of some examples for you. So when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I'm pretty sure I had no fun. I mean, that's probably an exaggeration because that's how my sense of humor is, but I really didn't value or prioritize fun at all. Like, I very much prioritized and valued so much more achievement and approval seeking and work ethic. And I still really value working very hard, but I don't think, like before, I would think that fun has no place. And through the process of recovery, I had to embrace fun as a value. And I do value fun a lot more. When I think about like, okay, what are my values? Which is essentially asking the question, what do I want to be about? Like, fun is up there. I like to have fun. I like to be fun. And I like to be around fun people. And when I had an eating disorder, it made me so miserable that it was near impossible to have any fun, and certainly to be fun myself. I've felt pretty rotten and isolated and super depressed and anxious most of that time. So that's definitely shifted. And I think the fun alone is totally worth all of the hassle of working on recovery. Another one that's really changed for me is that I really value being brave. And even though I am a deeply nerdy, conscientious introvert who loves school and day planners and is completely happy to spend some time alone reading, I also feel like there are ways in my life that I really want to be brave and to stick up for people or things that I believe in, or to go after things that I believe in, or to make a difference in my community. And all of those things that I work really hard on have required a lot of bravery. So again, I don't want you to hear any of this as like self-congratulatory, but just as an example of, I really wanted to build my private practice to meet the specific mission in the community that I'm in. I practice in Denver, and I really believe in the mission of our practice and specifically how we act out our values in terms of finances. So we're an insurance-based practice. And a lot of people told me, that's crazy. You will never be able to get on insurance panels. And we did. So I feel like through recovery, it taught me to be so much more brave than I ever was. When I was struggling with my eating disorder, I really feel like looking back, I was so scared all the time of disappointing people, of getting in trouble, of messing up, of having people leave, of being judged, of being criticized, whether I was, projecting that on other people or whether it was actually happening, both of which were true. I really felt like I was immobilized by my fear. But when I got in touch with what I actually value, I value being brave and being vulnerable and taking the risk. And those two things can't happen all the time at the same time. And so I had to learn to value bravery and act like it more than fear. And a lot of the time, I'm still really fearful. I'm a very anxious, cautious person, and it's not uncommon for me to take a risk and freak out about it. But I also have done a lot of work to create space in my life to have bravery and to try to do things where I feel like I can act brave because I believe in something, or because I want to help people, or just because there's some greater mission behind it. And so I don't know, that's been really empowering, and I definitely didn't feel empowered when I was in my eating disorder. The other obvious one that you all could probably name is I value my health. And as we all know, when you have an eating disorder, that is not healthy. And I'm not saying that to shame you. Please don't hear it that way. But we all know that your eating disorder doesn't care if you're healthy or not. Like, it just cares that it wants to stay around and keep going and hang out with you. And it makes you deny all of the ways that it makes you so unhealthy. And that's how the eating disorder functions. You have to have a certain level of denial in order to keep doing the behaviors. That's just how they work. That doesn't mean you're bad or you're doing anything wrong, but your eating disorder is definitely going to get in the way of you understanding and really taking care of your health. So, for example, we all know you have to eat in order to be healthy. And if you're struggling with restricting, that's directly getting in the way of it. Or abusing exercise. We all know that that is not healthy. So I think the eating disorder gets in the way of us valuing our health and acting like it. And that's certainly shifted for me over time as well. And that so many things have improved that, of course, I eat normally and non-eating disordered anymore. I also have a much more peaceful relationship with exercise, with sleep, with my weight and shape. That's totally different too. That's shifted as a value for sure, because when I was in my eating disorder, that really ranked probably in my top 3, if not number 1. Like, I just want for my weight and shape and everything to be what I think it should be. And I want everybody to approve of that. And it was hard going through recovery and having to let go of that, but that's ultimately what needed to happen. And of course, I value my health, and I value aesthetic in a way too. Like, I like to feel attractive. Who doesn't, right? And I like to be able to feel like I'm beautiful. Who doesn't? I think that that's pretty normal, but it doesn't matter more than the things that are truly important to me, like compassion or charity or service to others. Those things matter so much more than the number on the scale ever can to me. And then I wanted to just wrap up with the last one that I think has been a major shift in my values through my recovery. And again, this will be different for you. And I'd be really curious to hear what shifted for other people too, in case you want to email me about it. But one of the things that really changed in my recovery is that I went from valuing approval from other people and people pleasing, like pathological people pleasing, excessive, unhealthy people pleasing constantly, to not really valuing approval very much anymore. Of course, I like it when people like me. Of course, there are people whose opinions I really care about. Of course, I want to be liked by most people. I think it would be pretty bad if I didn't care at all about that and I couldn't get along with anyone. That would be a problem. But there are a lot of times when I feel like, I don't think this person really likes me, and I don't think that they get what I'm doing. They don't really get what I'm about. They're not on the same page with me. And ultimately, if I look at that and there's, no conflict that I'm causing or contributing to in an unhealthy way, I'm kind of just like, well, I guess we're on different pages. Guess they're not going to approve. And I swear to you, if you would go back in time and tell myself before recovery that this is how I would wind up, there is no way I would believe it, because that used to be so important. So the thing is that the more that you value these things in line with eating disorder beliefs versus your own beliefs and values, the harder it is for you to get anywhere that you actually want to be. Like even if my eating were normal and my exercise was normal, but I still held on to really, really needing approval at the level that I used to with my eating disorder, there is no way I would have ever started a podcast or a business or anything like that. So some of the time, I think those things do need to shift. And I think you should be gentle and curious without judgment about what the possible shifts may be and how to make them really gradually, but also to be honest about what are the values that maybe are coming because I have an eating disorder versus if I didn't have this eating disorder, what would I value? What would I really care about if I didn't have to worry about my weight and controlling my calories, or if I wasn't so scared of painful emotions, if I were more open to emotions, what would I be able to do? So I wanted to kind of list off also some common values that I think eating disorders mess with. I think that they interfere with the things that we actually care about in order to keep themselves going. And again, that's cool if you don't believe that. That's fine. The first one obviously is health. And so we talked about that. There is no way that you can truly value and honor your health if you have this eating disorder telling you to do things that are inherently unhealthy. Like it's just a direct block to valuing your health. The second one, and this is one that I hear all the time, especially from my clients, is eating disorders interfere with honesty. If you value being honest and you want to be an honest, authentic person, it is really hard to do that when you have an eating disorder. And that's not because of you or something that's wrong with you. It's because the eating disorder prevents you from being truly honest and available. If you are using behaviors and keeping them in secret, the eating disorder forces you to lie and hide and cover that up and all kinds of stuff. There's no way that you can be as honest as you would be if you didn't have the eating disorder. And so again, please be gentle with yourself when you're hearing this, but also make a little room to think about like, oh man, is the eating disorder getting in the way of how honest I'm able to be with people, how honest I'm able to be with myself? That's another big one, is that of course it gets in the way with how honest we can be with ourselves. Most people, because of their eating disorder, wind up thinking, my eating disorder is not so bad. I don't need to go to treatment. I can do this on my own. Other people are worse off, so I probably shouldn't do anything about this, or this isn't affecting my health, or I'll stop once I just get to this one number. And all of that is interfering with your honesty with yourself. And I know that for me, at least, it's really, really a top value of mine to be honest, especially with myself, because I can't make any progress and I can't grow in the way that I want and need to if I'm not honest about exactly where I'm at any period in time. Another value that I think eating disorders mess with is relationships and connection. So a lot of the times my clients will say, I value my relationships. I value my family, my partner, my loved ones, my friends, my siblings. So important to me. I love being connected. I really value having connected, honest, intimate relationships with people. Well, along the same lines as the honesty thing, eating disorders get in the way of you valuing that and being able to act in line with those values. So one of the top ways I think that happens is eating disorders tend to make people isolate. And if you're isolating, you are not acting in line with your value of relationships. If you want to be in relationships and have great, fruitful relationships, you have to be able to be in them sometimes. And your eating disorder can block that. It doesn't want you to get out there and get support and be connected. It wants you to stay at home miserable alone and use some behaviors to deal with some feelings. We all know how it goes. And the other thing is eating disorders, as we've talked about before, I think that they start out as really trying to help us, and that they're trying to help us get through some super uncomfortable feelings. And unfortunately, they just keep themselves going by causing us to use more behaviors. You should listen to the Eating Disorder Vicious Cycle episode if you want more information about that. But if you really want to be in a close, connected relationship, there is risk involved in that. There is vulnerability involved in that. And we have to share things and take chances and work through conflict. And that is anti-eating disorder mission. Your eating disorder says, no, 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 no. We only do the comfortable emotions. So we can't do these relationships. So if you're isolating and not opening up and not sharing and not asserting your needs or bringing up your feelings or addressing conflict when you think something's gone awry, that is your eating disorder preventing you from the values that you have about relationships and connection. And I feel like that can be a big problem for people. And relationships, I think, can be so healing for us, from our friends and family to partners and pets even, that it's an area where your eating disorder definitely wants to interfere. And then lastly, I've already talked a little bit about these, but a few that I think also eating disorders mess with are bravery, adventure, and fun. And I think when you have an eating disorder and you're feeling miserable and you have to isolate and you have all these secrets about your behaviors and you can feel so shameful, you're not going to be out there taking chances, exploring everywhere, thinking about the next big thing to do. More likely, eating disorder is going to make you think about, like, what happens if people don't like this? What happens if people say out loud that they don't like this? What am I going to do? What happens if I try this, but I fail? What if I fail publicly, which is your eating disorder's worst nightmare? And we all do it. We all have public failures. It's cool. I wish there could just be a club where we could all list them out and feel a little bit more normal about it. But I think when you're really stuck with the eating disorder value set instead of your own, it doesn't want you out there getting out into the world and like taking those big risks, because as I just said, the eating disorder, one of its functions where it's trying to be helpful is it's trying to keep you comfortable. It's trying to keep you away from feeling any discomfort. And the thing is, sometimes living out our values, especially in recovery, causes us to have uncomfortable feelings. When we try something new, it will feel uncomfortable. And that's because it's new, not because it's wrong, because it's new. And eating disorders generally do not like that. I mean, if you talk to anybody who has an eating disorder, who works with eating disorders, you could be like, hey, how do eating disorders feel about change? They hate it, all of them. My clients tell me that. I don't know. I hear that at least like once every single work day. I hate change. I'm like, I know. But the thing is, when you really want to go after these values, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. And I promise you, you can feel a little uncomfortable and you will live through it. And you're going to learn so much from it. And the discomfort cannot last forever. I promise it can't last forever. And the more that you go after your values, not just the values that the eating disorder has, the better you're going to feel. You're going to feel so much more at peace and so much more real because you're being authentic. And you're going to feel so much more fulfilled because you're going after these things in life that you actually care about. Not just weight and not just how much you're working out and whatever event you're training for and all that stuff. you're going to be going after things that you've been thinking about for a long time, but maybe you've been a little bit too scared or too hesitant to do. Maybe you wind up, I don't know, starting a really cool charity project, or asking somebody you're interested in out on a date, or you get involved in a health organization in some way that's truly healthy. All kinds of things can happen when you figure out, what would I be about if this eating disorder wasn't here? Like, what would I be doing? What would I care about? And what would I need to do to make that happen? So I think it's a really interesting, totally worthwhile question. And kind of shifting gears a little bit, I just wanted to say a little piece about this before I wrap up. When it comes to valuing aesthetics and beauty, I think you can totally have that as a value. I don't think that there's anything awful or wrong about valuing aesthetics and appreciating beautiful things, be they in nature or be that beauty in people or be that art, whatever. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And that's totally fine if that's one of your values. And I think that the key parts are to think about, okay, if this is an authentic, true value of mine, I know that my eating disorder is going to twist this for its own purposes. So it's going to be helpful for you to look at that to see, is this getting twisted? What are my values about beauty or about what I appreciate in aesthetics? Like, what is that versus what might be part of the eating disorder getting in there? Because I think people have a much broader definition of beauty and what they appreciate visually versus what our eating disorders will allow. And that kind of leads me to the second little sub point on that, which is take it in context. So we have talked about on the podcast, and the next episode that will be coming out after this is an episode with Dr. Michael Levine, who's like a brilliant, ridiculously prolific researcher in the eating disorder field. And we talked a lot about the cultural context that eating disorders occur within. So it's fine to value beauty, and it's okay to want to feel beautiful yourself, of course. And we also want to know, like, in the background, where are our ideas about beauty coming from? And a lot of the time for people who develop eating disorders, we've really internalized what's called the thin ideal, or now some people are referring to it and researching it under this more broad idea of the beauty ideal. And so we know that if you were to picture, what does a beautiful person look like? What does a beautiful woman look like? What does a beautiful man look like? An attractive man look like? We have some key things that come to mind, and that is just couched in the thin ideal that right now in our world in 2017 in privileged Western first world countries, it is preferred for people to be, especially women, thinner, to have certain proportions, to be younger. The list goes on and on. You all know what I'm thinking about, right? And so part of that is also examining, okay, I do value beauty, and it's okay for me to value beauty if that's what you do value, but also knowing, like, where is that coming from? Is that coming from some white guy who made that up in the 50s or 60s, and that's where my idea of beauty came from? If I broaden my idea of beauty out, would it be different? Do I need to broaden it and make more room for the diversity that exists naturally in nature and in human bodies? Does my idea of beauty look really white? So I think all those things are really important to look at. And so I don't want people to hear the message that if in order to recover from an eating disorder, you have to let go of caring about how your appearance is at all, or if you're interested in fashion or makeup or whatever that may be, that's fine. I just think it's also helpful to look at, where is that coming from? And is my eating disorder twisting that at all? So I think those are a couple good questions. And again, always be compassionate and gentle and kind with yourself, and look at it with curiosity, without judgment. Rein that judgment in if you possibly can. So I think that is it for tonight about values. Again, next up is our episode with Dr. Michael Levine about preventing eating disorders and sociocultural factors of eating disorders. So we're going to talk a lot more in depth about that cultural context of what we think of with what is acceptable in appearance and what is not. So stay tuned for that. And again, if you haven't signed up for my email list, I would love to send you the intro to my book. So go ahead and sign up at eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com. There'll be a little pop-up that comes up. Put your email in there. So until next time, I will be thinking about you and wishing you the best. Thanks for joining me for another episode. Let's keep in touch. You can find all the information you need about the podcast at eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com, including full podcast episodes and links to all of our social media sites. You can join our Facebook group for the podcast by searching Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast on Facebook. This is a closed group for listeners of the podcast looking to connect, share resources, and get involved in a pro-recovery community. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or YouTube. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. Talk to you next time on the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast.